Hey y'all, my name is Parker and this is International Review coming from DC. Today is October 25th. I am joined by my co-host,
Jake,
Gibson,
Michael.
Today we're diving in on the Spanish-American War, a short but explosive conflict that changed the fate of empires and catapulted the United States onto the global stage. By the late 1800s, America was booming and eager to expand its influence, while Spain's empire was crumbling. In 1898, after the USS Maine exploded in Havana Harbor, the U.S. declared war on Spain. The result? A swift victory in both Cuba and the Philippines. In the treaty following, the U.S. liberated Cuba and annexed the Philippines. Today, my co-hosts will each share a theory of international politics to help explain the cause of the war. First, my colleague Jake will offer his idea.
Thanks, Parker. It's a pleasure to be here. I believe an offensive realist explanation makes the most sense for the Spanish-American War. A prominent offensive realist, John J. Mearsheimer, argues the overriding goal of each state is to maximize its share of world power at the expense of other states. America sought hegemony both in the American system and on the global stage. In contrast to the position in the early 1800s, America's power and economy had grown multiple times in size. Like all rapidly growing states, America sought to revise the current global order to reflect its new power level. The first step to this was liberating the rest of the Americas, ensuring U.S. dominance in the New World.
That makes a lot of sense.
The timing was just right for the Americas too. Spain was at its lowest point since their peak in the 16th century, with a weak military and a weak hold over their colonies. Mearsheimer argues the international system creates powerful incentives for states to look for opportunities to gain power at the expense of their rivals. America sought to declare war on the Spanish to capitalize on their weakness and seize Spanish territory in the Americas and the Pacific for themselves.
That's very insightful, Jake. Gibson, what do you think?
Thank you, Parker. It is my belief that the Spanish-American War was mainly caused by imperialism. I agree with Jake that offensive realism motivated the war, especially the rising competition in the Pacific between the US and Japan. However, the strive for national prestige cannot be discounted. The influential Spanish Prime Minister Castillo said in a speech, "The Spanish nation is disposed to sacrifice to the last pecheta of his treasure and to the last blood of the last Spaniard before consenting to anyone snatching even one piece of his territory." Many Spaniards saw Cuba as not just a colony but an integral part of the Spanish nation that must be protected.
Interesting.
Yeah, the Spanish monarchy and the people saw capitulation without a fight as the ultimate humiliation and damage to the national prestige. On the other hand, the US desired to prove its newfound power on the world stage and join the table of great powers. What better way to do this than dominating the once greatest power in Europe?
Excellent point, Gibson. Michael, how about you?
Thanks, Parker. Well, I believe that ideology was influential to the declaration of war. Many in the U.S. saw Spain's colonial control of Cuba as mirroring Britain's former subjugation of the American colonies. The idea of liberating Cuba was a driving aspect behind public support of the war, and the Teller Amendment passed by Congress stated that the U.S. would not annex Cuba but instead help them gain independence as a democratic nation. This shows the motivation of the United States during the war with Spain was spreading its ideology.
What an outstanding point, Michael. We are pleased to welcome a colleague of mine who is an author and expert on international and domestic politics.
I would argue that it's really a little bit of all the points. I mean, when you look at it, of course the U.S. wanted to expand its influence. Of course the U.S. wanted to protect its own interests. Of course the Spanish didn't want to lose the territories. But also the U.S. wanted to help make these territories, as we know from the Monroe Doctrine, free from European colonialism. So I think it really ties into all of them together. And I think you guys are really hitting the nail on the head with your individual points, but I think you need to tie them in together.
Thank you, Max, for your helpful information. Thank y'all for tuning in and all of my co-hosts for joining us today. See you next week on International Review.